Okay, I remember. So we were talking about actions, right? And
yes.
the idea of playing an action.
Yeah.
And I think when you really look at it, an action is a result of what I perceive, right?
Yes.
An action, I perceive something and an urge arises in me and I follow it. So the action is kind of the end result of what I have already perceived. And this is one of the main differences, again, with Demidov, that perception comes before action. Action is not the prime motivator of emotion. It's what we perceive that gives us what we do.
Sure.
So
well, I just throw in at this point, actually, it's got to come at some time, the name of Sanford Meisner, a Meisner devotee would argue that that's exactly what Meisner's all about as well. Really, I don't know how you. I know you. I mean, I have kind of mixed feelings about the whole. I rather like Meisner in many ways, but this before I came to Demidov. But I don't know what your thoughts are on what are the big differences.
Well, I mean, I'm not here to kind of disparage any other technique.
No, I know, absolutely.
If it works for you, wonderful, do
yes.
it. I would just say that, like I said before, any permutation of Stanislavski, no matter how far away, if the foundation is based in Stanislavski, it's still going to be limited.
Yeah.
And, for example, in Meisner, you have, emotional preparation, right?
Yeah.
Where you're meant to be, as far as I understand, provoking a certain emotion that corresponds with the scene you're about to play as a preparation before you go into that scene. Well, again, that's willing something into being.
Yes, that's true.
In Demidov, it's not necessary to do that. If I've properly absorbed the circumstances and I've done my preparation properly, then I give myself complete freedom. And my subconscious creativity and the circumstances pick me up, and the scene in a sense plays itself. Because one thing that's, I think, broadly misunderstood is that we don't play character. We don't play character. Character inhabits us and plays us like an instrument if we leave ourselves alone and don't interfere. So the other thing, and again, I really am not here to
no, absolutely. It's interesting because what it comes down to possibly is that the people have only a very slight knowledge of Meisner, which includes me, I'm afraid, really, if I'm honest. All you know about is the pinch and the ouch, and the repetition exercise, which is all about giving and taking stuff with a partner. But I never, in looking at it, never got beyond that to emotional preparation, etc. So that I hadn't even thought about, if I'm honest.
And repetition, it's true that the focus is on the partner, but that's only one aspect. Our ability to perceive comes in through many different channels. It might be an inner experience. It might be an emotion that arises. It could be a physical sensation. Yes, it also could be the impression I'm getting from my partner. But training ourselves to truly hear and truly see on stage or on film is more about just attention to the partner, more than that, because Demidov himself says that too much attention to the partner is equally as difficult as too much attention to self. There needs to be a balance, right? That I'm perceiving what's arising in my own creative organism, as well as what's happening with my partner. So I'm not suggesting it's not useful, but I'm just saying it's only one aspect of a much broader world of perception. That's the only thing I would say, and again, but if it works for you, do it.
Well, Demidov works for me, but that you brought something there that puts in mind a question which someone sent you, which I mean, I think I'm pretty sure I know the answer anyway, but she says, how can I tell whether I'm in an etude, whether I'm green lighting as myself or as the character? Well, I think you've just answered that question already in something you just said, actually, but
yeah, well, we don't make a distinction, right, between who is and who is the character. I am the character. So in our etude work, you know, after we go through that little process of assigning the lines, tossing the lines away and emptying for those couple of seconds, whatever happens after that is what I surrender to. Because we're training ourselves to give in to the very first impression or perception or emotion or mood or whatever it is, or impression from the partner, and to give into it fully, training our ability to surrender fully to whatever is there. And whatever is there, right? Because I only have one truth at a time. And if I don't surrender fully to that, but I try to make something else happen, that something else is going to be a lie.
Yes.
And we don't worry about, you know, well, is it me or is it the character? Because it's both. It's both. We never lose our personal I am as an actor.
No.
But there is also this not me which emerges, right? You are not my brother. These are not my words.
Yeah, yeah.
So there is another being, which is, as Demidov says, born, the just born character in that moment. And that's what we are training ourselves to surrender to.
Yes.
So in these etudes, we are training our transformability, our ability to transform into whatever happens. And whatever happens is none of my business, right? And all of these etudes are something, as you know, Richard, we never let go of, because these are our actors' scales, right? Our partner scales.
Yeah.
Like a musician practices scales, these are our scales where we are practicing certain abilities and sharpening our perception and practicing our ability to surrender fully to something, which we never do in life. Very rarely do we surrender fully to anything at either end of whatever end of the emotional spectrum we want to talk about.
Yeah, it's not safe half the time anyway. You know what I mean? It could be a very dangerous thing to do at occasion. So
exactly. So that's the thing I would say, right? That we don't worry about, is it me or is it the character? I am the character in that moment. So that's what I surrender to.
That's not exclusive to Demidov either, because I've always said, because I've been teaching since about 1980, I think it was. I've always said, you know, that old cliche of all you got to do is discover what are the character's problems and solve them for the character, basically as yourself, but you're the character because of, you know, what you're solving on their behalf, which wouldn't be something you'd normally experience, etc., etc. So it's for me, it's kind of acting common sense in a way to take that approach anyway.
Well, that's why.
So it's the same person asked, again, I'm not quite sure where the answer to this comes from, but how do I get rid of particular acting habits, like a particular tone of voice, etc., which sounds to me like we're saying about mannerisms, really, I suppose. How does one get rid of those in the work? How does that help?
Yeah, well, I mean, as actors, you know, we all have certain ingrained habits, which might refer to as reflexes, that we reflectively you know, behave in a particular way in response to particular stimuli. And what we work with in these etudes is we don't worry about that so much. We just train more and more our ability to surrender to the truth of what is currently there. And slowly over time, these, what Demidov calls the habitual masks, these masks that come up reflexively, we are slowly rewiring ourselves, retraining our reflexes, so that those habits fall away on their own.
Fall away, yes.
And we don't have to worry about that. None of what happens in this work is done through force or effort. It's completely opposite.
Yeah.
And this is what Demidov understood very well, that the teacher or facilitator's role is not, as Russian Andrei likes to call it, picking off every flea off the dog, meaning constantly pointing out all the mistakes, which a lot of acting teachers think is their job, right? I'm here to tell you where you are wrong all the time. And of course, that's the easiest and fastest way to crush an actor's faith in their own talent. So in this work, in this technique, in this school, part of our work is, which is something, you know, we believe in, is restoring the faith in the actor's own talent, and you know, overlooking certain what we might call mistakes to a certain degree, and encouraging the actor to be bolder, to go further, to surrender more, to leave themselves alone even more, and praise them for that.
Yeah. Yes, I witnessed that a lot in workshops with you. It is that both of you, but the other Andrei as well, Russian Andrei too. It's so supportive. So that's a supportive way of teaching. I mean, if you know, you'll always kind of apologize if there's any tiny sort of what is to you presented as a tiny adjustment that needs to be made, or you basically the thing. This is as you know, my favorite image of all is a bit about missing the train. That you end up on the goods train instead of the express because you were so slow to grab the impulse. But yeah, I'm very aware of that. I'm also aware of that this thing you do seems to happen once the actual script of the etude is over. Your constant sort of, it's a very incredibly gentle but almost emotional response to what's going on. And the word, you've never heard the word correct so much as one will hear in a Demidov session at all, because it's correct, you know. And I start getting emotional myself just watching the thing, you know, because the whole atmosphere comes up. But
that's not a lie either. It's not that we're throwing false praise around.
No.
It's the ability to live inside the moment with
and it's sort of saying trust yourself.
Mm-hmm. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah,
there's a wonderful image in the book, in this massive tome of becoming an actor creator. It's a wonderful story that Demidov tells about, you may know it, there was a town where there were a bunch of fools who built a house, but they didn't make any windows or doors. And so they made a tunnel under into the house, which was completely dark. So they thought, how do we get rid of the darkness? So they started bringing in sacks and filling the sacks with darkness, taking it outside and emptying it. And they were doing this all day, all night. And of course, darkness wasn't disappearing. And then a sort of heroic figure comes, goes into the house, sees the problem and lights a candle. And Demidov says, this is what we should be doing as acting teachers.
Yeah.
Don't take the sacks of darkness, bring a candle.
Yeah, fantastic. It's wonderful.
Yeah.
I mean, I've been guilty over the years, many a time, of doing that thing, picking the fleas off.
Me too. We all have. We all have. But we know, I think, instinctively somehow that that it's not right. And somewhere deep down. And I think a lot of that also comes from the insecurity of the acting teacher.
Yes.
That they have to have something to say, right?
God, yes.
And of course, sometimes, which unfortunately I've actually witnessed, you know, they're projecting their own bullshit onto the actors. And it can be incredibly damaging. And I think, you know, as teachers of acting, we should have to take the same Hippocratic oath as doctors, you know, first no harm.
Yeah.
And if you can't do that, you shouldn't be teaching acting.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely right. On the subject of teaching, you know, I had my conversation about all this with the wonderful Kirsty Stewart, brilliant British actress. about the thing. And she also, we both taught at the same, at different times at New College, Lanarkshire. And her concern was, I think you've answered part of her thing, was the thing, because does somebody, you know, at the very early stages, straight out of school, can they jump straight into Demidov's work with having no understanding at all about playing actions, etc., etc., etc.? I think your answer would be absolutely yes. But it's interesting, because talking about the self-consciousness of this 18-year-old who has just emerged from school, where everything is very, very, you know, tightly controlled and disciplined, etc., etc., etc. Huge self-consciousness at that age, etc., etc., etc. How, you know, then there's suddenly they've got this etude, they've got to think, how are they free? How can they become free enough, as opposed to really explore that etude?
Well, they explore it to the extent of their, you know, of the stage of life that they're at.
Yes. Yeah.
And in fact, it's actually a very good idea to get actors when they're young to enter this work before. And I notice it myself, you know, in quite a few of the courses that I run, I will have people with, you know, who are very trained, very experienced actors, and some who come have had very little or no training at all. And they are usually the ones who are the most available and bold, because they're not bringing any baggage. You're not having to kind of try to let go of your previous training, which creates all sorts of habits and fears and insecurities and all the rest of it.
Yeah.
Not impossible, of course. Of course it's not. But when you talk about somebody who's, you know, coming with no experience and who's young, I mean, that's a perfect time to be entering this work, like a blank sheet of paper, where you're not burdened by you know, a lot of former training or criticisms or self-judgments, or yes, there might be self-consciousness there, but as you know, Richard, once you start working in this technique, that starts to fall away.
Yes.
You know, when you feel like you're held, when you feel like you're supported, when you're in an environment where the facilitator is on your side.
Yes, absolutely.
And also when you start to have a sense that you can let go, and you have a sense of the truth that emerges when you do. That in itself is creates its own momentum.
You can progress in some tiny steps, I suppose. You know, one is self-conscious, but there's a tiny thing there, and you're supported in that, and so you think, oh, that's possible, okay, yeah, and then you go and then you try something a bit more, and it gradually develops. I think that makes total sense to me, actually. Well, you know, I don't regret my 3 years at Drama Centre and working with Peter Cheeseman in Stoke. I thought was brilliant, and various other people over the years, you know, but actually I've been waiting for Demidov, I think, really.
Yeah, and as I said, like, it doesn't matter what level of training you come with. From day one, you're being taken straight to the subconscious, and that is, you know, when I'm truly allowing that, all of the, you know, whether or not I'm a very seasoned actor or whether I'm completely new, all of that makes no difference at all.
No, right, absolutely, yeah. Let's have a think. Another thing of Kirsty's, which is, I'm not sure if we've covered or not, but she talks about, she played Duchess of Malfi very successfully at the Glasgow Citizens, and she talked about particularly the scene in the start of Act 2, I think it is, where the Duchess is imprisoned, etc., etc., and the circumstances are just massive. That there's so much going on. And as she said, I've forgotten how she put it. Basically, you had to be a complete loser not to be able to play the scene. But the circumstances are just coming at you like crazy. But what do you do the night when it's not working for you? That's her question.
Yeah, it's a great question. Well, it's all to do with preparation.
That's what I thought.
And the way we prepare, certainly in this work, the way I've done my preparation, the way I've absorbed the circumstances, the way I've allowed myself to facilitate the character, which is something we learn also, and also all the training I've done through the etudes, which we never let go of. To surrender to the truth of what's there and to leave myself alone completely. But if I've done all the correct preparation and I have reminded myself of very calmly of the circumstances leading to the point where I go into that scene, those circumstances that ignite me to be able to play that scene, if I've done all the correct preparation, then I leave myself alone, and whatever truth is there is what is there.
It won't be the same every night.
Will not be the same every night.
And that maybe is the fear when you think it's not working. It's actually because it's not the same, possibly.
I have no goal in mind, and I don't touch the scene at all that I'm about to play. And of course, we have this wonderful, as you know, Richard, in this work, this genius technique of forgetting, right? Of tossing everything out, of emptying of everything. And then I give myself complete freedom. And if I've done all that correct preparation, whatever happens in the scene is going to be correct. If I've correctly done that preparation and absorbed those circumstances, it doesn't matter, it's going to be correct. The circumstances will dictate how I behave, not how I do what I do, but that something happens, right? The circumstances will carry me. And you're absolutely right. It's going to be different every night. I've used this, this analogy before, but if I'm playing Othello and I've properly done my preparation, I've properly absorbed the circumstances, then I'm not going to go out tonight and forgive Desdemona, right? Because it's not in the circumstances. But how I kill her tonight is going to be different from last night and different from tomorrow. Tonight it might be with rage. Tomorrow it might be with pity and compassion. How I do something is not my business. That something occurs is in the circumstances. So that's all about preparation. And without getting into a longer discussion of what that entails in this work, is just to say that if I've done that correct preparation, I leave myself alone entirely. I'm not worried about how something is going to work tonight, because whatever is current for me, whatever is there, is the truth. It's a wonderful, there's a wonderful story of Russian critics talking about, I think it was Mochalov, this great Russian tragedian, playing, I think, something like Hamlet. And they had two critics on two different nights describing one scene. And they could have been talking about a completely different scene.
Yeah.
How he was raging and, bouncing around the set with absolute rage. And the second night, he just sat and a single tear rolled down.
Yeah.
This is what it means to truly surrender to my current experience and not to worry about how something should be, because that's when we get into trouble. And not trying to repeat what I did last night, because not only is that impossible, it's destructive and it will be dead.
Yeah.
If I'm staying true to the principles of giving myself complete freedom, it doesn't mean chaos, right? Which some people kind of think, well, if I'm just leaving myself alone entirely, anything can happen. No, because it's not in the circumstances. Circumstances are the things that dictate my behavior, not how I do things or what I feel. unless that's in the circumstances, and that's another story, which is, it's also possible. But do you see what I mean?
I do, yeah. The interesting thing is reminding oneself or whatever of the circumstances for each performance. The great fear is always, you're always constantly trying to keep out of here, trying to keep the intellectual side of things away.
Yeah.
There's a potential danger maybe within, remind yourself of the circumstances that it could become like, remind yourself what your action is supposed to be or whatever, you know what I mean? I don't know, is there a particular, it truly is my question, this as well, but is there a particular way in those circumstances when you're away from the class, is not someone else who's kind of helping you remember them, the
Yes.
way of bringing them back to yourself so they can kickstart everything again?
Yeah, there absolutely is. And again, I don't want to sort of get into the weeds of the practice, but it's simply a matter of calmly reminding myself of certain facts, not how I should feel or what I should do, just simply the facts that I remind myself of those certain facts that somehow ignite me. And in whatever way, right? How they ignite me is not my business. Remind myself calmly, I'm not trying to provoke any emotion. I'm not digging into my own personal traumas to make myself feel something. I'm simply reminding myself as a character, reminding myself of certain facts. I let myself absorb those facts, and then I toss everything out, everything.
Yeah, absolutely.
And surrender to whatever comes.
Yeah. It's interesting. There's for some reason on my notes I've taken today, I actually wrote down something which Russian Andrei said at one point. I'm not sure I've heard you say something similar. I can't remember exact wording. It was effectively, we are ruled by the facts, or the fact rule us, or one or the other it was, I think. And that is, it's kind of the bedrock of the whole thing, isn't it? It seems to me.
It's absolutely true. And if you think about it, you know, we don't when we're on stage or on film or whatever it is, we are not in that moment thinking intellectually of the circumstances. I mean, that would be nuts, right? Yes. I'm not sitting here thinking right now, you know, I am Andrei, you are Richard, we are having a conversation. That's just nuts. That doesn't happen in nature, in life. No. We respond at an emotional level, intuitive level. We are just responding to circumstances as they arise and interacting and living. And we don't know what's going to happen next. I don't know what I'm going to say next. I don't know what you're going to say next. And this is as it should be, right? Yeah. And to try to force myself to think about what is my action or what is the circumstance right now, I'm completely out of the moment. As soon as I go to my head, I'm out of the moment. And you know, acting is an embodied experiential activity, and it's not about cognizing second for second what's going on. Yeah. And this is the issue I have with you know, with premeditating what I should be doing and wanting and thinking at every step of the play. Those are all results. And if I do that, I'm playing one result after another. And what happens? Then it's dead. It's just dead. And we have...
I remember I was at Rose Bruford, about 4 years in a row, I think it was. I did it's a Chekhov exercise, scene study thing I used to do with first year students. I remember being asked one year, could you work on their, what's it called? The inner monologue. I want you to work on the inner monologue. Just did my head in. I thought, how the hell do you do that?
Right.
What, you got to get to work out what. I mean, sorry, I'm sure the true Stanislavski teachers, and particularly the person who asked me to do it, is a fantastically good teacher, actually. I'm not sure how one is supposed to do it, but that seemed to, you know, kind of fog the brain so much, potentially trying to work out what you're really thinking while you're actually doing what you're supposed to really be doing, or et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
And when do we ever do that in life?
No, I know.
A lot that goes on, that is true, but I'm not trying to manufacture it. It's happening to me.
Yes.
And that's the whole point of well, one of the main points of this work, that things happen to us, and all I'm doing is surrendering to them.
Yes.
If a thought or an emotion or a physical sensation comes, or an urge to move or whatever it might be, and I surrender to it, then how is that a choice? It's not a choice. It's happening to me, and I'm giving into it.
It's a reflex or something, I suppose you'd say.
Yeah. And that's why we say in this work, there are no choices. There are only inevitabilities.
Yes.
Which means something that happens to me in that moment, it's inevitable, and I give into it.
Yeah.
See what I mean? So it's not about, a choice implies a decision.
Absolutely.
And, you know, I can make choices, but I'm going to be in my head.
You know, I've got, I think you're aware that I'm a big fan of Shira Haas, who is in Unorthodox. You watch her performance in that to me is, I've talked about Tommy Lee Jones as well, but her even more so, actually, that you just see the world kind of pouring in on her throughout the entire performance. You never see her, you know, making obvious acting choices at all, but it's all happening, and it's so moving as a result. It's fantastic stuff. And
it's wonderful, and that's a great point. I did see that too, and I agree. I think she's amazing. But once we get a taste of the truth, it's very difficult to go back to something which is more analytical and premeditated. Because we sense that it's false. We sense that it's something that you can see it, right, Richard, when we do an etude. In the big stages, it's very easy to see when an actor has pre-planned something. This is how I'm going to play the etude. It's very obvious when an actor does that. And, you know, pretty soon they get tired of it. They get tired of doing that, right? Because it takes a lot of energy and effort to come up with something. And pretty soon they get tired of it and they let go of it. And when they let go of it, the whole world opens to them.
It's very difficult to do. Speaking from a kind of student's point of view, as it were, it's very, very difficult to do that. And that thing that you've said before, you know, say this, if you say to yourself, this can't be right, that's a disastrous thing to say. But there are moments in an etude sometimes when I think, oh, that felt a bit fake, you know, or whatever, you know, and it kind of, the whole thing falls apart as a result.
And of course, with time and with training, we learn more and more. I mean, we always slightly watch ourselves, right? When we're in front of an audience, we always slightly watch ourselves, and there always is that watcher there. But more and more in this work, we allow that watcher to become just more of an interested observer and a support rather than a critic or a judge. Because we don't, you know, judging ourselves is not our business. Our business is more and more to give in to that thing when it's there.
I think that's another thing within this. It's actually this danger of all the time one wants to make a good impression as a performer, and that seems to cut against this work as well, actually, because obviously it does, because it's too much coming outside it.
But I mean, even that, you know, we all have that impulse to greater and lesser degrees, but we learn, right, with time and with continual practice in this work, that starts to take care of itself after a while. When my perception is on just simply giving in to whatever the truth is of what is happening to me right now, when I fully surrender to that, then everything else kind of recedes into the distance. And the more practiced I get at that, the easier it becomes to give in to to whatever arises, whether it's a thought or a physical sensation, or a mood, a shadow of a mood that passes over my face, or an impression from my partner that makes me feel a particular way that I give into, whatever it is. That practice of surrender, and as I said before, the practice of transformability, when I start to kind of master that ability to surrender, everything else recedes into the distance, everything, including my own self-judgment.
Yeah. There was something again, something of Kirsty's again, which was you're on stage. Somebody drops a tray of glasses in the wings, or someone in the audience gets up, or a phone goes off, etc., etc., etc. Yet one keeps going as an actor. One has to. How does one, within this approach, how does one deal with that?
Well, it's all part of the circumstances.
Yeah, absolutely.
It all just becomes part of the circumstances, right? And when I've surrendered to character, when I am character, I hear something in the distance, right? It also becomes transformed as part of the circumstances, because we have to remember that moment of surrendering to character is a transformation where my consciousness is doubled. There is the me and the not me. And the me, the actor, might hear a phone going off. The not me, the character, might hear it as birds in the distance or whatever. You see what I mean? That circumstance just feeds whatever is happening for me right now. The wonderful story of, Demidov going to the provinces and seeing a performance where, it was a very good, well-known actor, and a cat walked on stage in the middle of a very heightened scene.
Yes.
And the me, the I am of the actor, kind of noticed, wouldn't disturb him, but noticed that it might disturb the audience. So picked up the cat and just started to pat it, but it just became perfectly part of the circumstances, because it was a scene of such pathos.
Yes.
And never came out.
Yeah.
Didn't come out of character, but it just became part of the circumstances. So no matter what it is in this work, it was meant to happen.
Yeah.
See what I mean? And that's the way we view it, but it becomes transformed. In that moment, he was picking up the cat of his former wife, who was now with somebody else.
Yeah, absolutely.
Very gently stroking the cat. You
Yeah,
see what?
Absolutely, yes. Tiny adjustment to the circumstances, which actually enriches the.
Yeah, but not seen as an adjustment. It just
no, absolutely not. No, absolutely not. It feeds it further. Yeah.
So whatever happens feeds me. Whatever happens, and in this way, I'm free. I'm utterly free.
And presumably you never totally forget that you're an actor.
No, of course not.
You can't. I mean, that would be an insanity, really.
Of course not. I mean,
it happened to Daniel Day-Lewis once, but
well, that would be pathology, right? But but it's just that for some actors, very few, but for some actors, that gap between the me and the not me is very close to the point where there seems to be no distinction. But there always is, of course, there always is. And that's part of when I talk about training transformability, that's part of what we are doing, right? That little moment of surrender to that first, whatever it is, that first impression, that first emotion or sensation or whatever it is that I surrendered to, that is the character. That first thing that we surrendered to, that is what Demidov calls the embryo of the character. But the I am of the actor, of course, never disappears. We just train more and more to allow that I am to become, as I said, a supportive observer in the same I support you when you're in the etude. You see what I mean?
Yes.
It takes that role.
Okay. Now, we've been going over an hour now, I think, actually. Can you believe? However, you can edit out that moment. But how about just one other thing, really? What about the thought that I have that Demidov obviously sits beautifully with naturalistic acting? What happens, A, in musical theatre, B, in Artaud, Brecht, Beckett, etc., etc., etc.? Does it still work, as it were?
Well, we're not training actors for any particular style.
No, I know, that's the thing.
It's a technique that takes us to the freedom to give in to whatever comes.
Right.
So we're not training actors to play a particular character or to work in a particular style of theatre. Before that, we are training our organism to gravitate towards freedom, no matter what the style. So I used to teach teach acting on the musical theatre course at Central, and I introduced Demidov there, where we would use the principles of the work. They would assign the lyrics of the song just as text, as well as assigning the absorbing the circumstances, and then toss everything out and give themselves complete freedom. And it works. It works. It works in exactly the same way. They assign the lyrics of the song because these are words, right? This is text.
Yes.
There is the element of music, which adds a different dimension. That is absolutely true. And that is something more heightened. And our ability to surrender to what music gives us is a completely different question. But the text, the lyrics itself, that is just text. Those are words. And we assign them in exactly the same way, go through the process of tossing everything out, right? So anything can be assigned, as you know, Richard. Anything can be assigned, whether they're very restrictive blockings, stage directions, anything can be assigned, which is a different process from memorization. It's not about memorization, it's about dropping these things into the subconscious. And then I give myself complete freedom. And if I'm, for example, working with very restrictive blockings, I can assign all of those stage directions, and it will then occur as part of my lived experience, part of what I feel like doing, rather than just because I've been told to hit that mark. But in terms of your question, absolutely, you see my point, right? It's not about training for a particular style. It's about working on our ability to transform into anything, on our ability to give ourselves complete freedom, no matter what the particular style of work might be.
Yeah, so you're sort of freeing your creativity. It's more than just freeing just your everyday personality for you, or everyday behavior for use in a scene or whatever. You're freeing something beyond that, which can be
And style is to a large degree encoded in the text anyway.
Yes, that's true.
And that's a completely different story.
Yeah.
However, probably we should leave it, right? Because we're already over an hour.
Yes. That could have gone on. Okay, question 37. Yes.
But it's been an absolute pleasure, Richard. Thank you so much.
Yes, indeed. I was just getting into it. Yeah.